great turnout here. I want to thank everybody for coming out to the Heroes Quest panel. My name is Myklusch. I'm the author of the Jack Blank Adventures, which is a middle grade series published by Simon & Schuster, Aladdin, which if you're not familiar with the books, think of it kind of like a cross between Harry Potter and the Avengers, which I know would appeal to nobody in this room. But I want to thank you all for coming here once again. Joined by a fantastic panel of authors to my left. Let's have a hand for everybody right now, please. I'm going to introduce everybody to you. Seated in order, we have Peter Lerangis, Seven Wonders. Peter Brett, that was the Daylight War. Stefan Bachmann, Beth Durst, author of The Vessel. Steve Bein, whose book is Daughter of the Sword. Rae Carson, author of Crown of Embers. And Joanne Bertin, author of Bard's Oath in the Dragon Lord series. So, there's a lot of names with a lot of different books. Some of you guys may be familiar with one or more of these authors, maybe or maybe not. What I want to do, just to start everything else off, is let everyone just go through the line and just kind of tell us what their book is about and give you a sense of the worlds that they're created as we go into this panel where we're going to talk a lot about heroes venturing into fantasy worlds. So Peter, we'll start with you.
Actually, correction, I'm not, my name is the Colossus of Rhodes. Okay, you got that? I apologize, I don't usually dress like this, but then again, I don't think I have to apologize in this crowd. But my name is Peter Lerangis. I'm writing a book called The Colossus Rises. It's book one of a series called The Seven Wonders. I don't have a copy of it right now, but I will shortly, I think, right? And it's about four kids who are kidnapped and taken to a secret island and told that they have a gene, that they have a gene which will kill them by the age of 14. Right, there you go. That's a copy of the book right here. Thank you. You took my copy, didn't you? Yeah. Unless they go and find the 7 orbs, which we call oculi, that contain the animating power that originated from the lost continent of Atlantis. And if they find them, they'll save their lives, and they also may raise the continent. So that's the 7 wonders. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Peter Brett, author of the New York Times bestselling Demon Cycle from Del Rey Books. This is the first book, The Warded Man. The third book is finished after a very, very long time, and it's due out in February. The Demon Cycle books are about a world where demons come out every night, and the only way to protect yourself from them is to surround your home or your lands with magical symbols called wards. Humanity has fallen from a once great scientific culture to near extinction. And this story is about how humanity learns how to start fighting back if they can stop fighting amongst themselves long enough to do it. And so the individual books are character studies of individuals in that world. There's a lot of magic and action and things like that, but the real story is how people survive in this really, really harsh world and the sorts of life-changing events they have that shape them into heroes that will go on to do great things. I hope you give them a try. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Stefan Bachmann. I wrote this shiny book. It's my first book. It's called The Peculiar. It takes place in a 19th century England that's kind of alternate history. There's magic and there's steampunk. And they're kind of like at odds. And the main character is a changeling who is half fairy, half human, and he gets caught up in a big plot, and changelings are dying. They're showing up in the rivers of England covered in red tattoos, and he has to figure out what's going on. So it's kind of a mixture of all my favorite things. And yeah, I'm really excited about it.
I'm Sarah Beth Durst. My new book is called Vessel. It just came out a couple weeks ago from Simon & Schuster. And it's set in a desert land where wolves made of sand hunt within storms and serpents made of unbreakable glass fly through the sky. And it's about a girl named Liana who is destined to sacrifice herself so that her goddess can inhabit her body and use a magic that will save her clan. But then her goddess doesn't come.
I'm Steve Bein, and my book, Daughter of the Sword, opens as what looks like a fairly straightforward police mystery set in Tokyo. Tokyo's the only woman in Tokyo to make the rank of detective and sergeant in the most elite police unit in the city is investigating a case of a stolen sword. The owner of the sword believes that it's magical. She doesn't believe in that sort of thing, but it turns out she has to revise her opinion on that. And so this sword has actually been killing people for 900 years, and when I say it's killing people, it's not just merely being used by samurai to kill people. It has a will of its own, and it's been exerting that will over people for centuries. And in fact, there are 3 such swords, and so this book is, on one level, a police Yakuza story, and on other levels, historical fiction covering everything from the samurai era to World War II.
I'm Rae Carson. This is The Crown of Embers, which is the second in the Fire and Thorns trilogy. The first book, The Girl of Fire and Thorns, introduces readers to Princess Elisa, who is a chosen one. This is a chosen one subversion fantasy. It's kind of political quest fantasy, like Game of Thrones, except instead of Jon Snow, the protagonist is a lot more like Ugly Betty. People don't have a lot of high expectations for her, but throughout the course of the series, she becomes the person that she needs to be to truly save the world.
I am Joanne Bertin, and I'm the author of the Dragon Lord series. The third one is called Bard's Oath. It takes place not too long after the events in Dragon and Phoenix, and the setup is in Dragon and Phoenix for this, where there is a bard who discovers a way to pervert the bardic magic, and the Dragon Lords have to figure out what is going on so that they can save their friend who has been shall we say, taken over by this magic. And for those of you not familiar with the series, the Dragon Lords are were-dragons, able to shape-shift back and forth from human to dragon.
All right, so building on that, this next question is a little long-winded, but bear with me. You know, as I'm listening to all you guys talk about your stories, I'm hearing a lot of kind of mashups of different things, you know, be it, there's lots of different, I guess, categories that can encompass fantasy, right? You know, I'm hearing about steampunk, Atlantean lore, crime thriller mashup with ancient Japanese, martial arts and magic with a dystopian kind of bend, dragons who are also kind of shapeshifters, kind of like a mashup with a werewolf and a dragon kind of vibe there. I feel like as writers, when we sit down to write something, a lot of times we're drawing on the stuff that we love. You know, things that we really enjoyed and want to kind of do our own versions of that thing. But we have to do something new. Like, I know in my own experience when I was a lot younger, I tried to write this action adventure story that was kind of my own Indiana Jones. And when I was done with it, it was not my own Indiana Jones, it was Indiana Jones. But, you know, it was a learning process for me, and I took that down the road to when I started working on the Jack Blank Adventures, which was a more comic book based story, which was my other great love. So I'm curious, and we'll start down here. You know, A, what do you think is the line between inspiration and imitation, and where do you go for just that spark of what you're going to draw on to make your story?
I mean, I think basically we all have one job, and that's to tell a story. And I think we all tell it in a certain way. Now, you know, there are plenty of people who say there are only two. My agent says there are only two stories. You know what those two stories are? Well, number one is a stranger comes to town, and number two is you are going on a mysterious journey. And I think that sort of simplifies it a little bit. But, I mean, one of the things is, you know, the kind of story that I write now is the kind of story that I wrote when I was 8. I mean, you know, it has the same kinds of themes. It's just, I think it's just basically what I've been built to do. And, you know, the secret of publishing, I believe, especially when it comes to now what we call so-called legacy publishing, is people tend to buy certain kinds of books. And a lot of times you can write the most wonderful story from your heart, and you won't sell it, 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 and all of a sudden someone else will sell something like it, and it'll become really popular, and then all of a sudden you'll sell it, you know, and it'll be the same story that you've been trying to sell your whole life. It's a really odd thing. I went into a publisher once and I said, I've got a great idea for a series, and I worked it out, and it was based on Greek gods, and I knew it was going to be a real hard sell, and everyone was saying nobody reads about Greek gods, and the premise was, you know, the gods are among us. And I finally got it together to bring to a publisher that I wanted to do it. I said, this is a great idea, you know, don't be put off by. And they said, well, you know, Greek gods don't sell. Besides, over at Hyperion, you know what's coming next. There's this guy who's working on almost the identical idea. Let's see how it does, right? So, you know, nobody would have touched that, but, you know, it's just the weirdest thing. So I don't know. I tend not to want to or think about writing books that are based on anything else, unless it's a work for hire that's, you know, that asks me to write an Indiana Jones story, and that happens too, right? But unless it's, you know, I will write what I feel like writing. And I just pray and hope that you know, the market is there and the publisher will want to publish it. I guess that's a cop-out answer, but that's kind of how I feel.
I don't think it's a cop-out at all. I think that most writers, there are some writers who intentionally write to a genre. They are looking to get published, and they're focusing their writing on what do I think is going to sell, what's popular right now, what I can do that. But I always think that is kind of the wrong way to go about it. I think every writer throughout history is just regurgitating what they've read before and their own life experiences, and they absorb that and they spit it out into something that hopefully is a little new and different from what they've done before. I did not set out to write epic fantasy. I read a lot of epic fantasy. I read a lot of horror. I read a lot of comic books, and I read a lot of other various things. And I set out to write the book that I wanted to read. And when it was done and I sold it, the publishers classified it as epic fantasy and put it in that section and marketed it in that way. But that wasn't what I didn't set out with the intention of writing epic fantasy. But I know that that's what I like to read, and so it certainly came out in the influence. But I think there's a lot of horror in my books because I always like to read Stephen King and Frank Herbert and things like that. That's what writers do. I mean, you are always a product of your influences, and anyone who says that they're writing something totally original and they're not derivative of anything is just lying. And that goes for all of the great writers that you can think of in the past. They grew up reading something and were influenced by that too. So that's my piece on it. I know there's a lot of people here, so I'll keep it on.
Yeah, I do. I think I agree with these guys. It does kind of, like, everything you read is going to influence your book in some way. My book was actually influenced by a Disney movie, which sounds really promising, right? But The Great Mouse Detective. I love that movie. But anyway, I think it kind of, like, you have to write what you want to write, and what you want to write is probably what you're reading, and so all of that's going to go into your writing. But I do kind of think that if you're writing something, even if you have, like, maybe the exact same outline as another author, your book would be really different, probably just because you're a different person writing a different thing. I don't know, like, that's just my theory. I think like if you gave 3 authors the exact same outline and each one wrote it, it would probably be a way different book. But I mean, you can copy really exactly too. I think that everything I write is in some way related to everything I've read. But I think because everybody's different, the book's going to be a little bit different too.
Yeah, like you said, I think that's totally true. Have you guys heard the adage, write what you know? I completely think that that's wrong. I think it should be write what you love. You should write what you're passionate about. I have one of my favorite writing tricks or techniques is what I call the rule of awesome. So you start with an idea and you say, is it awesome enough? Like, I decided I want to write about a desert. I'm like, all right, well, there's sand, there's sun, that's nice. Is it awesome enough? I'm like, well, what if there are wolves made of sand? It's kind of cool. And dragons made out of glass, kind of cool, and gods walking around in human bodies, and a young emperor, and so forth. And so that can take you all the way to a novel, and what you'll end up with by combining these things that you think are awesome is your own story. So even if you're inspired by these other things that filter into you, and you will be, they will come in through your worldview, through the things you care about, through the things you think about, through the things you believe, and it will come out your own.
I think that write what you know thing is wrong too. I mean, it doesn't get you real far if you want to write sci-fi or fantasy stuff. So I can't write what I know and write what I think is cool. So I can't. But there's another adage, and this is cribbing from Picasso. He said, "Good artists imitate, great artists steal." So I was thinking about that when you asked your question, and I guess when people ask what's your inspiration for this, I don't think that's, I think it's the wrong question when it comes to something as long as a novel. You can say what's your inspiration, well, for what? For this character, for this scene, for what exactly? Because this is hundreds of pieces put together at this point. What's your inspiration for this piece of dialogue? I can say in my book, there are samurai showdowns in it. I have them in there because I love Kurosawa, and because we had, growing up when I was in Chicago, we had Samurai Sunday on Channel 66, and just back-to-back chop-sake movies every Sunday morning, and I love those things. I had at one time probably 50 Jackie Chan movies on VHS, and so, you know, I mean, when I write a fight scene, I can ask myself, like, look, do I want to write Jackie Chan or do I want to write Kurosawa, right? I mean, and here I'm doing Kurosawa, maybe elsewhere I would do something, Jackie Chan's a lot lighter, right? So, I mean, absolutely, when I'm writing these fight scenes, I want it to be Kurosawa worthy. So there he's, I don't know if it's inspiration or if he's, you know, the role model or the, you know, I mean, he's who I'm emulating. But I don't think there is an inspiration for the thing. I think if there is an inspiration for it, then you're in trouble. I mean, then you end up writing Indiana Jones 5.
Exactly, which we all know 4 was about nothing.
Right, exactly.
Well, I'm not gonna lie, the first thing I ever sat down to write, which I just knew everyone was gonna love, was about a space princess with shiny hair buns, and a rogue space pirate, and a farm boy with an epic destiny. I was 9, I mean, give me a break, but that is, I think, how a lot of authors start off, is just by imitating what they love, these guys were saying. But a kind of interesting thing happened to me in that over time, as what Sarah was saying, my worldview creeps in and my own life experiences creep in, and pretty soon I realized that I didn't want to copy that anymore. I was in a conversation with it, and I had some things to say about the princess in distress or the chosen one. And does that really mean that you have agency? Or maybe it doesn't. So I think what Steve was saying about imitating the masters first, that's how you learn. Whether it's, you know, playing classical piano, you play Bach for a few years before you start composing your own masterworks. And I think that's how a lot of authors start out. We imitate, and then we evolve.
I think for every writer, you know, part of your inspiration is everything you've ever read, all the stuff you loved and have gone back to. It's sort of settled into your mind, way in the background. Maybe you're not consciously imitating it, but it's there giving you the love of the genre that you want to write. And inspiration can come in very strange places. When I was in high school, at about 16, I did a drawing. And in this drawing, everybody but one person had their back to the artist's viewpoint. And over time, I made up stories for every person there, except for the guy who was facing me. I had no idea who he was. Until 20 years later, he showed up in a dream and was a were-dragon. And okay, that was a surprise. I had not expected that at all. But from that, I took Lyndon, that's the character's name, and started writing about him. And he was the catalyst, because I tried writing about the other characters, didn't work. I found out I was starting the story 600 years too early. So my inspiration came from this drawing, which was probably, inspired by every fantasy thing I ever read. And then the one character showed up in my dream. Of course, that's got to be my subconscious. That's been percolating slowly. Couldn't do it any faster, thank you. Percolating this through, and then finally saying, here he is. He's a were-dragon. Have fun.
It's so cool how everything can come from, ideas can come from everywhere. And I never ask people where their ideas come from, because half the time we don't know, and when we do, they're from the most random places that you can't even explain. Like a picture you drew when you were 16 years old, or a story you saw on the news that made you think a certain way or got you upset. And you almost want to weave that into the story and make a statement on it, but not in a hit you over the head kind of way. It's part of the story, and maybe it's there for people to take or leave. But I agree with everybody. I mean, we are the sum total of our experiences, and everything that we read and enjoy kind of becomes a part of us, and you can't really separate yourself from that in your writing. And that's why, to Stefan, to your point, I think you're right. To put any one of us with the same idea here at this table, we would all turn out wildly different things. And I think that also goes into what you were saying, Rae, about how the first thing you wrote was, the kind of a Star Wars-esque, very Star Wars-esque piece. And when you think about it, the story of Luke Skywalker is very much the story of Harry Potter, right? This kid who has been separated from his family, has his part he's going to play in this big conflict, is tied to his past that he doesn't know about, and his family. But those two stories, I don't think anyone would ever say that J.K. Rowling stole from George Lucas. They're wildly different because they're different people and they have different imaginations, and they took those stories in crazily different places and bolted wonderful things with them. But I'm interested in the part where, and we'll start with you, Joanne, and work back down this way. The part where you are in your story, and maybe it's not even perceptible to the reader, but do you feel a need, or in some cases, depending on who your audience is, a responsibility to get a message out to the reader, whether it's about a certain issue or just a certain message about what's right and wrong in your story, or is it something that kind of comes about when you're done, maybe you see what you have? How do you approach things?
Okay, that's a tough one, and you're making me go first. Thank you. I don't know. There are things where there are times when I'm having people, characters, do the things I would want, maybe myself, to do the right thing in a certain situation. And I'm maybe afraid I wouldn't have the nerve to do it, maybe to stand up and say that's wrong, or to stand up for somebody else. So I don't want to try to hit people over the head with it, but a lot of times when I'm through writing something, I'll say, okay, yeah, I guess I was trying to get something across, when hopefully I can tone it down a little bit, or make it so it's not so obvious, but let somebody figure it out for themselves, because if you smack somebody upside the head with it, it usually just annoys people.
Yeah, I agree with Joanne. It's getting preachy in a book is not super entertaining for the reader to read. When I write, my number one priority is to write something that will make people turn those pages and not want to stop reading because they're having so much fun. That's number one. But my worldview definitely creeps into my writing, and I feel really strongly about writing about young women who have agency, who don't need to be rescued by men. These are things I believe very strongly, and so it does come out in my writing. But like Joanne says, I hope I don't get too preachy about it, because I don't want to hit my reader over the head with a hammer. That's no fun.
And it also eventually dilutes your message, because once your readers become so aware of a message that they can't enjoy the story anymore, then you've lost the battle.
I guess my initial response is to echo that sentiment, that I think it's dangerous to have an agenda and to write to that agenda, and sooner or later you're not writing fiction, you're writing propaganda. And that's no good. And I mean, really, really heavy-handed allegory is just as bad as having an agenda. That said, I mean, I'm a philosopher by trade. I write about the things that I find philosophically interesting. I'm interested in questions of identity. I'm interested in questions of ethics, and those things are going to enter into what I'm writing. And I think anything, if you have to write a book that only you could write. If you're writing a book that anybody could write, you should find something else, or somebody else should write it. I mean, great for you if it can pay the bills, I guess. But I'm not interested in that. But I do say at the same time that I'm interested. For me, I'm interested in the questions, not the answers. And so figuring out what the questions are and how to ask them in interesting ways, and then I leave it to you to figure out how you want to answer the question. I can let the characters answer questions, and you might not agree with those answers, and that's fine with me for you to disagree with those. I mean, that'll determine whether you like the character or hate the character. Sometimes you can play with that on purpose, but I think it's dangerous to do propaganda instead of fiction.
I'd say a big no to the message thing for me. When I open a book, I want to be transported somewhere. I want to go on an adventure. I want to step through that portal and go on this grand journey and come out the other side feeling like the world is a little bit more magical than it was before. To me, books are these magic things. They can do that. They can cast the spell over you. They can take you someplace that you've never been and will never go, and introduce people into your mind and into your heart. And I think all of that should come before any thought of message. I mean, there is a place for books that have a message, but they're not the books that I'm drawn to personally, so they tend not to be the books that I write. And I would hold message to be something separate from theme. I think having a theme that unites it can be a wonderful thing that adds depth. But for me, message, no. Adventure first.
I completely agree. I would say that message should come separate or second to a good story. I think it is really, in a way, important to say something, though, something that you feel strongly about and that you want to say, because it's your book, and basically your writing is what is kind of your way of saying what you want to say. It just has to be really carefully done through the characters rather than like writing it out exactly what you think. So, because if the characters learn a lesson, it's easier for the reader to maybe project how they would react in the same situation or something. So I would say that it's just kind of hard to do. It's kind of hard to say what you want to say through your characters, but I think you should try to say something. I just don't think it should be as important as just telling a good story.
I think there's a distinction between message and politics or religion or worldview. You can have a message without having those things. One of the things that I'm really proud of in my books is that in some ways my politics and my personal beliefs are invisible in them. I've had people accuse my books of being Christian propaganda, and I've had people accuse them of being atheist propaganda. I've had people say, wow, this person is really anti-Muslim, and then I've had Muslims come up to me and say, thank you for respecting my culture. And like that shows that if you do it right, if you tell both sides of the story, people will see what they see what they want to see in the story. And that if you can tell a compelling story that gives real characters who present a real worldview and show that I'll have one character who'll experience something and you'll see it one way, and then in the next book, I'll jump back in time and show that exact same scene from another character's perspective, and the reader will walk away from that scene going, wow, I had no idea what was going on there. You know, I thought that person was a villain, I didn't see their side of it. And that, I think, is a message in and of itself. It's a message that maybe you really don't know what's going on as well as you think you do, or maybe if you put yourself in someone else's shoes, you'll see that the things that you feel passionate about maybe look very different to them. And so I think that that's a message in a way, but it's not politics and it's not religion, it's understanding. And so if that, like I do think that there's some sense to that, but you also have to tell a compelling story. If you don't tell a compelling story, then no one gives a crap about your message. And so that is in many ways the most important thing, but within that compelling story, you do have an opportunity to say something. I think it's important to do that as long as you're not hitting the people over the head with one side of things and holding back facts that might give another view. It's important. So that's my opinion on that.
I basically agree. I mean, I'm not going to say anything else about that. I mean, you know, message bad, definitely. And don't, once you start doing a message, you're tanked. I just want to take a station break here, briefly to do two things that I'm just dying to say, and I haven't said them yet. Number one is my dance break. Ready? Everybody up? Go. Okay, done. Matt. That's good. Matt didn't know that he was going to be the moderator until about literally 15 seconds before we started. So I just think we should give him a big hand. Seriously. I mean, you saw them like leaning down over there talking beforehand. That was basically Matt saying, "Okay, what am I going to ask? Oh, all right. Just totally game," which is kind of cool. The second thing I want to mention, I know this might embarrass somebody, but it's just so cool. I had to say it. Stefan is 19. Okay? And I think that is very, I'm sorry. I just find that so wonderful. Right? And I am too. No. The only thing that I would add to this is, you know, with Sarah, I don't know if you like to call Sarah or Sarah Beth. Sarah. What Sarah said was so right. You know, you as a writer, because I know a lot of you are thinking about this, you've got to start with a really exciting story in order to bring your readers in. You have to do it. Now, message, no. But what about theme? My thing to you is every one of us has something that we are really, really passionate about. Now, I once wrote a book based on a photograph that I saw of a polar Eskimo boy who had been brought to the United States at the turn of the century, and he had been orphaned here because all the people that he came with didn't have any immunities. They lived so far north, you know, they hadn't even seen a tree, let alone been exposed to germs, right? Nobody had written a young adult book about this boy and his life growing up in New York City, right? And I just saw the photograph of his face, and I knew instantly I had to write about this kid. I don't know why. When I started outlining what I wanted to write about, now this is a historical novel, so it has its own strictures, right? What I found really brought it to life for me was the fact that his father had died, had been one of the Eskimos who had died. They didn't call them Inuits back then, so I will call them Eskimos. And he'd been buried, or the Museum of Natural History had had sort of taken care of them. They sent off the father's body, and the boy wanted his father buried in the traditions of their tribe. And the museum, caught red-handed, took a log and wrapped the log with his father's clothing and buried the log, trying to trick this young man, this young boy, into believing that they were burying his father in a ceremony. And so the story became about that boy, his coming of age, and his finding out about what happened to his dad. And as I started writing, I started realizing that this was a book about fathers and sons. This was about this father-son relationship. And for me, that father-son relationship is something that animates everything I write. Why? I don't know. It's just who I am. But what you'll find from that book is some very profound things about that. There were a lot of other themes in that book, too, that came up, but they all pretty much came up after I started outlining the book. So this is what I say to you guys. If you see something that you're really passionate about, and you see the story first, go with the story. But really dig deep into who you are, because your own themes are going to come out whether you want them to or not. And you'll eventually recognize them. And when you do, that's what's going to make your exciting story something that everybody wants to read. Because, you know, a lot of people can write really fast-paced, exciting stories. A lot of people can do it. But the ones that are really, really good are the ones that take what's in that writer's heart, whether he likes it or not, he or she likes it or not, and makes that be the motor, the emotional motor for the plot that's to begin with. Wonderful.
It's well said. You know, that's absolutely right. I would, and that kind of leads me right into what I wanted to ask next, which is, I was going to embarrass you also, Stefan, by calling out your 19, which blows me away also. And I'm sure everyone in this room.
We were all 19.
You know, it's the kind of thing, you know, when I was in high school and in college, I assumed that I would be published by 19 or 18, and it didn't quite work out that way. But I think, you know, what everyone's been talking about here today, and what Peter just said so eloquently, is that you really have to write what's in your heart, and, you know, write the story that you're going to be most interested in, the one that you're going to have the most fun writing, because if you can't get excited about it, there's no way you're going to get other people excited about it. And that's something that took me a long time to learn as a writer. You know, that's some of the questions I've been asking today. I've kind of taken everyone through my mistakes, whether it was imitating an Indiana Jones-esque story, or writing a story that was too preachy with a message that I, you know, thought was going to be, you know, very not profound, but in the end was just me knocking people over the head. And I just had to settle down on what do I like. I like comic books. You know, I like superheroes and supervillains and ninjas and aliens and robots and androids and medieval magic and all this stuff. And I wrote a book that had all those things. And once I did that, that really, you know, I think that came through in the writing. And that's what made that the book that I finally sold. That was my first novel that came out. But, you know, there's no door that says new writers apply here. You know, everyone has to kind of go through all these bumps in the carpet and make their own mistakes along the way. And that's what I wanted to have everybody just kind of talk a little bit about, either some advice they might have for anyone in this room who's trying to make it, or just maybe talk if there's a funny story about maybe a mistake that you made along the way. If you could share it with everybody, I think it would be a lot of fun. And we can start with you this time, Peter, unless you feel like you've already kind of got it with your last one.
I think I kind of did. But more specifically about I'm not sure I got.
Either just
repeat the question.
Either just like mistakes you made along the way in terms of getting to where you are, becoming the writer that you are today, or just kind of like advice you have for anybody.
Okay, let me tell you, there is one thing. Let me tell you, and this is to especially to the young people in this crowd. When I was in middle school, the school hired some sort of career guide. Okay, this is like people don't believe this story. And the guy got up in front of us, and we're all 12 years old, and he said, "You guys are 12. By now you should know what you want to do for a living. And if you don't, you're in trouble." And so of course we all like breaking out in sweat, you know, and I don't know where they got this guy. And he goes, and after his spiel, someone asked, "Well, you know, what if you want to like be a musician or some artistic career?" And right, that's what I was feeling inside. And the guy said, "Okay, well, look, if you guys want a creative career, this is what you're going to look forward to." I kid you not. 1, you're not going to be able to make a living. 2, you're not going to be able to support a family. 3, you're going to spend your life regretting the fact that you didn't do something legitimate. And he went on from that, you know. And I remember as a kid sitting there listening to each of these things that he was enumerating, and inside my head I was going, "Oh, okay, I can deal with that. Oh, that's not so bad. Oh, so what?" You know, and at the end of it, you know, by opposition, you know, I realized, hey, maybe I should be a writer. But of course, you get older, and the messages do come home, and you don't get a lot of really positive stuff from people saying you can do this. It's kind of what we all do now. Is our message coming across is to encourage people, and I think that basically, if you have this incredible burning desire to do this thing, you gotta do it. And it's better to start young, when you have, you know, lowest overhead. But it's never too late, right? It's, I mean, if you're extremely wealthy and you can afford to do, you know, I would say to Mitt Romney, be a writer. Leave us alone. No, sorry. No, sorry. We're not supposed to talk about politics.
Message bad.
Message bad. But no, but I would encourage everybody, even if you have to do it in your spare time, I mean, do it, and take some of the things that we're talking about, take them seriously, and go for it. Because I'm not going to tell you that it's a crappy way to make a living, because it's not. It's great.
I wrote my first novel when I was 17 in high school. It was about a jock and a metalhead who were kidnapped by an intergalactic space wizard and placed on an alien planet and forced to fight creatures that he'd collected from different worlds. Yeah, it was not so good. Well, I mean, it was the whole like Breakfast Club kind of idea of like, oh, the jock and the metalhead have to find a way to work together, and it was crap. And so my next book was based on a D&D character that I had created and his series of adventures, and I was basically writing a D&D campaign as a novel. And I wrote the sequel to that too. And I tried to sell those, and my agent had no interest whatsoever and bounced them. And after I'd sent him a couple of books, he took me out and said, hey, look, you've obviously taught yourself to write rather than having formal training, and you've got some good stuff in here, but you have to raise your game. And it wasn't until my fourth book that I felt like I was doing something of a professional level that I could really show to people and be proud of, and not be like, oh, you just have to get through the first 100 pages and then it gets good. If that's what you have to say, then it's not good. And so I guess the message that I'm trying to give here is that anything takes hard work and practice, and you need to get better and better at it. And if you write a book and it doesn't sell or people don't want it, you have to write another book that's better, and another book that's better than that. And like every once in a while, you get a savant who hits it early and makes you think, oh well, that's how it should be. But I know the reality, like I know a lot of very successful authors, and every single one of them has some books in the trunk that they don't even want to show to anyone because they're horrible. And they're practice books. And it's a skill like anything else. And if you think that you're just going to get it all from dreams, or that you're just going to be this creative person who's just going to have it all come out, there's craft and there's hard work that's the biggest part of it. So if I'm going to give any advice to people who want to be writers, it's practice, practice, practice. It's not all fun. I mean, some of it is fun, but there's a lot of hard work involved too.
Yeah, I'm not a savant at all. I wrote about 5 books before this one, and yeah, the first maybe 4 of them were pretty bad. I wrote my first book when I was like 7, and it was The Hobbit 2.0. It was like everything was spelled wrong, every second word, and it was like chapter A, chapter B, chapter C, and it went on forever, and it was really, really bad. So that was like my first book, and I wrote a whole bunch of books in between, and I think it's kind of, you just have to work at it, and each one will get a little bit better, and you'll learn a little bit more about pacing and character and blah, blah, blah. And obviously it's better if you're older because you have more life experience and you have more to draw on, but I think a lot of it is, just practice and reading a lot, because that's one of the main ways you can learn. I mean, I don't know how you can actually teach writing. I'm sure it's possible, but a lot of it, I think, is reading and writing yourself and trying things out and making your own mistakes, I guess.
Yeah, they're all totally right. I think the single most important trait for a writer to have, beyond intelligence, beyond humor, beyond being able to string words together, is stubbornness, and sticking with it. And the more you write, the better at it you get. It's definitely one of those things that you learn by doing. I've wanted to be a writer forever. It's the only thing I've ever wanted to be, except when I was like 5 and I really desperately wanted to be Wonder Woman. That didn't work out for me. So it's the only thing I've ever wanted to do. And I think that, so the bits of advice I have is stick with it, don't give up, and you have to write. You have to write to be a writer. And write as much as you can. I highly recommend writing daily and making it part of who you are. As much part of your life as brushing your teeth, so that it doesn't become a big deal when you sit down to write. You're sitting down to do what you do. And the other thing is, don't listen to advice that doesn't work for you. because everybody's brain is different, everybody's process is different, and you need to discover your own. So if people like us give you advice and you try it and it doesn't work, there's nothing wrong with you. That advice just doesn't work for you, and you have to try something else, and that's okay. And just, if you have this dream, do it. It's worth it. It's awesome.
I'd say do it, but have a reliable source of income. It says the guy who got his degree in philosophy. I'm thinking of a couple of things. One is Graham Greene said the first million words are just practice, and so those of us who have a whole bunch of trunk novels sitting there, I wrote a trilogy of Star Wars novels while I was in college because I think that, and frankly I did a much better job of it than some people who made other Star Wars trilogies, but I really wish they had made my 3 and not his 3, but I think, I got the best piece of wisdom I've got in this business came from Charles Brown, who's a past editor of Locus. And he said, one of 3 things is going to happen to you in this business. You're going to quit, you're going to die, or you're going to get published. Right? One of those 3 things is going to happen to you, right? And some people should quit. Right? And so but I really like, I guess, my personal philosophy is that pessimism is the new optimism. All right? So if I assume that every time I send something out that it's going to get published, then I get lots and lots of disappointing rejection letters. If I assume that I'll never publish again in my whole life, I get the same number of rejection letters and then wonderful surprises every once in a while. It's like just, hey, look at that, isn't that really cool? I think managed expectations, frankly, I think managed expectations would have helped me enjoy those new Star Wars prequels better too. Right? If I had come in not thinking the world of them, then maybe I could have enjoyed them a little more than I did. The fact is, there's 10,000 people trying to do this right now while you're trying to do it, and very few of them are going to make it, and you might be one of those people, and if you take the no as a hard no, it's not going to do anything for you. I think Sarah's exactly right. I mean, it's stubbornness, not genius, that gets this done. I can tell you how this book happened. I looked for an agent forever, cold calling, sending letters out, and every single one of them said no. And I was like, at a certain point, I'm not giving up on the book. I think it's a good book, but this tactic for selling it isn't working. So I came to the Javits Center for a BEA thing where they had a Writer's Digest hosted a conference, and they had an agent pitch slam where they had 50 agents come down here, and you could sit down with as many of them as you could in 3 hours or something and pitch the book. And so I had, 8 or 10 agents say, yeah, sounds good, send me the manuscript. And every one of them said no. And I thought, look, if cold calling doesn't work, and if saying, hey, we met on Thursday, I was the guy with the blue shirt, you said you wanted to read this, if that doesn't work, then nothing works. And I didn't know what to do, and I gave up. And because I'm a bit of an airhead, 6 months later I forgot that I gave up, and the next agent I sent it to said yes. Right? That's what happened. That's a true story.
There's a line that says, you can't discourage a writer. Because if I can talk you out of being a writer, then you're not a writer.
That's right.
And that's, I think that's what you go through.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I was writing all this stuff well before I published it. I like writing. This is what I do to entertain myself. I don't watch TV. I write. So, if that's what you're doing anyway, well, why not send it out, right? And then you've got Charles Brown. Don't quit and don't die, and you will get published.
I think the path to publication is like the hero's journey, because we're all totally heroes, right? It starts with a dream, and then you have the really long, boring training montage to eye the tiger, and then when you've gotten okay, you're like, all right, I'm going to go to battle against this army of agents who are all saying, no, I will not represent you, and then finally you find the one who says yes, and yay, you have a sidekick, and together you battle your way to a publishing contract, and you're like, victory! And then you realize, that was just book 1. So it's hard, what Sarah was saying about being super stubborn, but my biggest piece of advice is Don't let yourself feel bad. Don't let yourself feel guilty if you're not able to pursue your dream every single day. Economic considerations have to win out. You have to be practical. These are tough economic times. Be stubborn, but don't let yourself get down if it doesn't happen right away. Don't let yourself get down if you get home from work super late and you just can't write that night. It's okay. You have a lot of time. You will get there.
Let's see. Okay. Thing is, what people were saying about writing is practice, that's absolutely the truth. I tried for 20 years to write the story of that drawing that I told you about before I realized I was starting in the wrong place. If you have trouble like this, I think the furthest I ever got was chapter 3. If you have trouble like this, please take less than 20 years to figure it out. But remember, once you do get going, one thing, keep going, tell the story you love, but remember, nothing you have written is set down in stone. If for some reason, just the way it's going, the way the story is flowing, you think it must be this way. Well, not necessarily. My joke is that The Last Dragon Lord, my first novel, is probably something like version 4.2. I went through it so many times and changed things. It started at A and ended at C, came out, started at a certain place, ended at a certain place, but everything in between changed a number of times. I don't consider that wasted because I was learning my characters more and more, what they would do, what they would feel. They were telling me each time the story changed. And then finally, we were all happy with the way the story went, and they stopped arguing with me, thank God. So the thing is, keep trying. Don't stop. Don't go into it thinking, I must get published. You're doing this because you love it.
That's all great advice. Let's have one more hand for everybody. We're not done yet. We still have a little bit of time, so I thought I'd open up the floor to questions if anybody has a question. I'll start with you, sir, right here with the glasses. Yeah.
Yeah, I like to write a lot of fanfic, and I've been seeing a lot of these books like Game of Thrones and the Wheel of Time series turning into board games and RPG. Are you also responsible to write that reference material, or is it your reference books being used as a material?
Okay, so I think the question is, when you see books that are out there get kind of adapted into other formats, be they RPG games or video games that may have a story component, things along those lines, are you responsible to write that? I would say that's probably not. It's probably something that's done. It may depend on the situation. I'm sure every deal will be different. Anybody else want to throw in? Anyone who has experience with that?
I think it depends. With the really big writers like Robert Jordan and George R. R. Martin, they have assistants who know the books backwards and forwards and can contribute a lot of that material. I know I'm working on the third book in my series, and I have to write that material myself. We're putting an appendix in the back of the book, and that's my job. And I wouldn't want anybody else to do that job. I insist on doing it myself because I don't trust anybody else to do it. And so I think it depends on the writer, and it depends on the stage of their career and how involved they want to be. Some people are comfortable letting their baby go and having somebody else work on it, and other people really want to keep that control. And so it varies.
Also, what are my processes of writing? Sometimes I'm not really getting the character, so I would do it in game form, or I could do Q&A, so someone can bounce off the ideas of these characters. Do you guys have these balancing sessions with other people or other people?
Let me just repeat the question so everyone in the room may not have heard it. In order to get a character down when writing a scene, sometimes working kind of a game form, going back and forth with another person, kind of in character to kind of get a handle on these characters. And the question is, do any of us have, similar or any other method for getting a handle on a character before you write him or her?
I know
Philip K. Dick used to write dialogue with himself and the character. He would, be talking about some big problem in his life that he was going through and say, whatever, you're looking at a divorce, and then you ask Decker from Blade Runner, what should I do, right? And he wants to talk about but he wants to talk about serious problems with the character and figure out who the character is from that point of view. And that was a really novel solution. Now, don't take all of Philip K. Dick's solutions, because you also recommend do a lot of cocaine, but that one minus the cocaine seems like it worked pretty well.
Yeah, a good thing with character. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I did a novel writing workshop, which was very, very helpful. If you get a chance to do a novel writing workshop with a teacher who writes in your genre, go for it. Especially if it's an author you respect. She had us interviewing the characters as if we were reporters and asking the characters a series of questions, and it might surprise you what they will come up with. It's like there were, things coming back. It was like, okay, I wouldn't have done that if I had just been writing straight, but that's what the character said. He was being true to himself.
Yeah, it's really amazing how characters can take a life of their own and surprise you. I remember listening to an interview with Tom Clancy where he talked about how he intended to kill this one character at one point, and then at some point in the story, the character did something so fascinating he couldn't go through with it. He couldn't kill him. And when I heard that, I said, look, this guy's out of his mind. The character did something. You write the character. The character didn't do anything. But that was a lot earlier on, before I kind of, taught myself how to write people a little better, where you really have to get to know your characters in terms of who they are, what's their past, what are they afraid of, what are their hopes, their dreams, what is their backstory of, maybe where they grew up and what their childhood was like, and all this stuff that may never even make it onto the page, but helps you know who they are backwards and forwards, so that when you put them in any kind of situation, you know how they'll react and what they might do and say, because that's what it is to know a person, and you got to kind of treat your characters that way. And if you really know them, then you'll have no trouble figuring out what their next move is. Please.
Just one thing. One of the big secrets, and this speaks to writer's block. And this has to do with acting, has to do with writing, has to do with every kind of creative art. In every scene, basically every character wants something. And a scene comes to life when you get not necessarily each of the characters, but each of the characters' wants. And if you have writer's block and you're in the middle of a scene, it's probably because you don't know enough about what one of the characters really, really wants. And if you get that desire, if you get that necessity that everybody has to get something, that will bring you through, in many cases, through writer's block. And that will also get you to know the character. It all has to do with it all boils down to that. And it's also the kind of thing that you internalize toward the end of a book. We all know the feeling at the end of a book when, you're just writing and you feel like your characters are talking to you and you wanted to go someplace and they say no, and they take you somewhere else. And you're up and you look at the clock and it's midnight, and then you say, I'll just do 5 more minutes, and then you look up again and it's 4 a.m. and you really think 5 minutes went by. And that's because at that point, it's usually the end of the book, you know so deep in your bloodstream what everybody wants. And you got to kickstart that a lot at the beginning of the book. That's what it's all about.
Okay, I think we got time for one more question, so we will do, you ready? Yes. The question was, how do you approach writing cultures that are so different from your own, and what is your research process?
I lived in Japan for a couple of years. That's enormously helpful to get to know the culture if you could spend some time there. If you're going to be writing about fantastical cultures, about invented worlds, when I'm writing that sort of stuff, I need to develop a language, I need to develop at least 6,000 years of history, I need to know what the geography's like. I want to know what these people are thinking about in terms of recent history, ancient history, mythological stuff. I want to know where their pharaohs are, that sort of thing. With Japan, Japanese culture is really, really easy to get wrong. I think more easy than most because it's so caricaturized in so many ways that we encounter it, including by the Japanese themselves. I mean, the anime and Japanese. Go on YouTube and watch some Japanese game shows, and you'll see Japanese people caricaturizing their own culture. And there's nothing so bizarre, nothing you can think of that they haven't done on a game show already. So like getting that stuff right, and I think understanding the culture for real and reading about the bad stuff as well as the good stuff, and I mean digging into all the little nooks and crannies. I think it just takes a lot. For me, it takes just a lot of background reading. I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
A minute left. I have the benefit of having created a fantasy culture, and so I wasn't held to any real world strictures. The culture, the Croatian culture in my books that is the most different is one that's it's an amalgam of a lot of real world cultures. There's a lot of medieval samurai culture, there's a lot of ancient Sparta, there's a lot of Middle Eastern culture, medieval Middle Eastern culture, but there's also a lot of stuff I just straight up made up. And it's, as Peter says, knowing what not just the characters want, but what the culture wants. Like what were their goals, what were the things that were important to them, and basing a culture around that, and focusing on, like, these are people that are fighting for survival. Their entire culture is based on war because they're going to be annihilated if not. And so how does that break down to, like, interpersonal relationships in the household? How does that break down to the marketplace? How does that break down to people who aren't strong enough to fight? And those sorts of things, when you think them through into different levels, a culture forms over time. It's not something that, it took a very long time to put that together. But it's not based on anything in the real world. But I do research by reading a lot and paying attention and trying to understand what people want out of life and what is common between us in addition to what's different.
Really quick before we go, I think I have about a minute left. Let's let everybody just go through the line and tell people where they can find you online if you want more information about any of these great authors.
Seven Wonders is the name of the series. My website is just my name, peterlerangis.com.
www.peterbbrett.com, or you can go to the Random House booth, 1120, and they're still giving away copies of The Word of Man, so.
I have a website, stefanbachmann.com, and it came out like 3 weeks ago. You should be able to find it in most bookstores.
My website's my name too, sarahbethdurst.com.
I think I picked the wrong name for a website. My website is philosophiction.com, which looks like philosophy, but ends with the word fiction. If you Google me, you'll find me that way, and it's facebook.com/philosophiction.
Actually, I think that's cool. I'm RaeCarson.com. That's just a placeholder mostly to direct you to my Twitter, where I'm way too active to be writing full time, and that my handle is Rae Carson.
Okay, I'm sorry to say that my website imploded a while back, and I lost my domain name, which used to be weredragon.com, and some bozo out in Russia is now cyber squatting on it, and good luck, buddy, because I ain't buying it back. My internet provider got me a new one because they let the old one lapse. They were actually supposed to be taking care of it. It's supposed to be lastdragonlord.com. And as soon as I finish, let's see, right now I've got an 8-year-old, a 4-month-old Luffy puppy, an old dog, and a farm to run, and at some point I'm going to find some time to redo my website.
All right, and
Matt, where are we going to find you?
And for me, thanks a lot. My books are the Jack Blank Adventures, so just go to jackblank.com. And if you found this conversation at all interesting, I actually do a podcast where I talk to authors about their writing process. It's called The Other Side of the Story. You can find that at othersideshow.com. That's available on iTunes as well. If you search my name. Let's have one more hand for our panel.
Thank you for coming. Have a great night.